Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project Live. We're so honored that you join us each and every week as we bring you new and interesting guests where you get to get something that's a little bit richer than what we normally do through our podcast. By bringing on our podcast guests onto the live stream show, you also get to share your views and also get to ask your deep questions to an expert in their field each and every week. And we're so glad that you're able to join us. So we're going to give you a little bit of time as we get set today. Please do let us know where you're joining from today and say hello so that we can see you and acknowledge you and welcome you onto the show today, and start thinking about what your questions might be around this key topic about branding and also around the concept of storytelling, because we are joined today by an award-winning strategist and also a brand storyteller. So we've got our first person coming in now. We've got Irene joining us from Manila in the Philippines, regular watcher of the show. Really good to see you, Irene, today. And if you do have some questions, please do start thinking about that now. We've also got Joanne joining us, also a regular watcher of the show from Taguig in the Philippines as well. So wonderful to see you both. We have Faris. We seem to be getting our regulars coming in here at exactly the right time. We've got Faris joining us from Singapore. We've got Gerald also joining us from the Philippines. So these are some of our regular faces. But please don't be shy. If you're out there and you're joining us today, please do say hello and tell us where you're joining from. We're really excited about the topic that we're bringing you today, and we want you to settle in and give you some time to make sure that you're connected and ready for today's show. We have my wonderful wife, Say, joining us as well. She's so supportive. She joins almost every week. It's only occasionally that she's got a scheduling conflict and she can't. And I have to, I'll advise our guest up front. She usually asks the toughest questions, I have to say, when we get into the Q&A. So please do remember to say hello when you come in, tell us where you're joining from, and get ready with those questions around branding and around storytelling. So if you do have a question, please do post it there. You're either joining here from Facebook in a live stream there, or you're joining from LinkedIn. If you can, please put a Q in front of your question so that Charlie and I will introduce our guest shortly. Charlie and I will be able to see what your questions are compared to what some of the comments are. So got a few more people coming in now. We've got Carlos joining. Carlos joined us for a webinar earlier this week. He's also joining from the Philippines and wishing us a blessed day. So thank you so much, Carlos. It's good to see you again. It was wonderful to see you on our webinar yesterday, and it's good to see you joining here again today. So please do remember, say hello, tell us where you're joining from, and start getting some of those questions ready. So as we progress, I'd like now to talk about some of the other things that we have happening on the Leadership Project at the moment. We've got Diane now joining also from Manila. We seem to have a very Filipino audience today. So welcome to all of our friends in the Philippines. Absolutely wonderful to have you join us. And we also have people joining from Singapore, as we mentioned, and we've got our very important guest joining us from the US today as well. So as we warm up, I'm going to share with you some news about some exciting things that are happening around the Leadership Project. So first of all, I'd like to point you towards our episode on the Leadership Project podcast this week. And we're delighted to be joined by Richard Newman. And Richard is the CEO and founder of Body Talk UK. And he's very captivating. He talks all about leadership presence, and he talks about body language. And for the first time, I fully understand what the word gravitas meant. And if you've often wondered what gravitas means and what presence is, and anyone joining us from New Zealand, you'd be familiar with the term mana. If you're familiar with these terms and you want to know more about that, please don't miss this interview with Richard that's on the podcast this week. And he'll be joining us for a future live stream in the not too distant future as well. And what I love about this interview with Richard is it builds beautifully from our interview with Charlie and our live stream guest today. So Charlie speaks a lot about brand and the importance of brand, what it is, what it's not, and what a leader needs to do with brand. He talks a lot about storytelling, and he's an amazing storyteller. And then Richard really builds on that with talking about this concept of leadership presence and about gravitas and about capturing people's attention through things like your body language and ensuring that everything that you do is congruent. So when you're telling a story, that your body language is also expressing that same story in a congruent way. So please, we do want you to catch that episode this week and then prepare your questions for when Richard is going to come on the live stream. The next one, a little bit of a surprise announcement, is that one of our team members, Joanne, had a birthday this week. We won't say what number it is. That's a little bit personal, but absolutely wonderful happy birthday to our Joanne goes on this week. We love you here on the show. It's absolutely wonderful for you to have your birthday this week, and we were pleased to share that with the world. And she did not know that we were going to show that, so she's probably sitting there embarrassed there somewhere at some point. Okay, so on to this week. This week we have Charlie Feinerman, and Charlie is award-winning strategist and a brand storyteller with Taoti Creative. And I've worked with Charlie as a client on at least 2 brand launches, and we were talking about it off air just a moment ago, where that brand launch, and we can't share too much about it, it's a little bit commercial in confidence, but that brand launch is soon going to come to fruition, one of the ones that we worked on. The other one was actually a little bit more than a year ago, and it was a great success as well. But Charlie's been working on something that he and I were working on before I left my previous employer, and that new brand is about to launch. So it's really exciting. We can't share anything about it. It's very embargoed, just to say that Charlie is amazing at what he does. So he's an amazing strategist. He's an amazing storyteller, and he really understands what brand is, what brand isn't, and what your role is as a leader when it comes to brand. So we've got Joanne saying, yes, she is very touched by this, and she did not know that birthday message was coming in. So thank you, Joanne, for joining us today. And once again, many happy returns from your birthday over the weekend. Okay, so please remember to get your questions ready. I'm going to introduce Charlie here in a moment. So please have your questions ready. Anything to do with brand, to do with personal branding, with company or organizational branding, the importance of it and what your role might be. Or if there's anything that you would like to know about storytelling. So without further ado, I'd now like to introduce Charlie onto the stage and bring him on to the camera here with me so that we're side by side. And Charlie, you are now off mute, and I'd love you to say hello to our audience and give a little bit more of your background to set the scene for today's discussion.
Absolutely. And first off, Mick, as always, you are way too kind. You flatter me with the introduction. Thank you so much. So, as Mick's mentioned, my name is Charlie Feinerman. Right now I'm Director of Account Strategy here at Taoti Creative. But I have a kind of deep and different history where I've spent probably about the last 6.5 years of my career working in agencies, helping clients from Fortune 500 and 100 companies through the federal government to nonprofits, associations, professional sports teams, etc. But before that, I actually started my career out in Phoenix. When I was still in school, I kind of went to school part-time for a little while and was a full-time member of the ESPN affiliate radio station out there. I was a reporter. I was a producer there for 3 years. Spent some time with the now Washington Commanders when I moved to DC and got my master's from Georgetown. And so I've kind of been all over the place, got a little over 11 years of experience in marketing communications. But the thing I really love most about what I do is the storytelling component, the brand component, that messaging component. I love nothing more than sitting down in a dark room and writing some messaging for a brand and trying to get into that mindset. So I'm really excited to be here today and to talk with you and to hopefully answer some questions from folks that have them.
Fantastic, Charlie. And people in the audience, if you do have some questions about brand and about storytelling, do start to get them ready now. I'll have a little bit of a chat with Charlie for a while, but get those questions ready so that we can help you the best that we can. So the first one, Charlie, I'm going to start with a challenging one, but an obvious one. What is brand?
Well, I mean, we talked about it on the podcast, but brand is really fundamentally, and as much as we want to talk about it as professionals and determine what it can be and focus on the nuance of this word and this logo and this treatment and this word mark, fundamentally a brand is ultimately what they say it is, with the people who consume it, the people who interact with it, the people outside of your organization and the people on the fringes of your organization. Your brand is what they say it is. It's what they decide that it is. It's the emotions that they feel. It is the signals that they read from your brand that they then understand and perceive that to be what the brand is. And ultimately, that is the brand, because word of mouth is the strongest form of marketing that there is. And if someone decides that that's what it is, that's what it is.
Yeah, really good, Charlie. And I think that covers two things there right now. It covers both what brand is and what brand isn't. So you see a lot of organizations out there pushing themselves and saying, this is what we want to be as a brand. But in reality, what your brand is the way people perceive you and the way that they talk about you. And I think one of the words that you used on the podcast was, it's what they say about you when you're not in the room. It's not about what they say when you are in the room. So let's talk about some kind of big brands, right? So why do you think the Apple brand is so successful?
Oh, the Apple brand is, I mean, it's such a great case study in what makes a good brand, right? I think that one of the brilliant things when people think about Steve Jobs, people talk about a lot of the different innovations that they did at Apple. People talk about a lot of these different things. The things that had the biggest impact on Apple's success, it's not even the devices, right? The devices are of course, you think that, oh, this is the biggest part. To me, the thing that makes Apple stand apart is everything else about those devices. It is the interaction, the experience that you have when you are unboxing one of those. That feeling, to me. When you have a box, if you've ever opened an Apple product, you slide a little box off, it kind of naturally slides off, but it has a specific speed that it slides off at. That phone is always charged to at least 60% when you get it, so you're able to use it immediately. Everything about that experience of interacting with that product, and then the cleanness, how clean it is, and then how clean it is when you get into the product, and how smooth that is in the transition, how those products have always connected so seamlessly with one another. That, I think Apple's brand essence is think different, if I recall correctly. And so, from your perspective, it's where else in the industry, in any industry, had you seen that level of white glove treatment to a mass produced consumer product before? It hadn't happened. And so when Apple came along and really did this and said, okay, to normal consumers who are not paying an inordinate luxury price, we want to make this available to everyone, and they can all have that same experience. You have the cleanness of this phone, how sharp the design is, and how, or this iPad or this MacBook, everything is so like fine-tuned and precise. To me, it gives you the sense of cleanliness. Whereas if you're on a Microsoft computer, if you're on a Dell or something, you'll get pop-ups. You used to get pop-ups all the time. You used to get have like all these different little ads that would pop up, and you never see that on a Mac. A Mac is always clean. It's always this almost futuristic level of space age technology, and it makes you feel like you have something that you almost shouldn't have in your hand. It's like this is something that came out of a movie, and it gives you the sense that, like, to use a word that you said earlier about the podcast this week, that gravitas. To me, there's a gravitas to Apple products that when you have them, you open them, there's something about them that sets them apart. And to me, that brand, and also the way they treat their customers too. When you think about, you go to an Apple store, the way every single person in there will talk to you, when you reach out to them, and the way you schedule a Genius Bar appointment to fix something, they're always really kind and genuine in the way that they kind of go about this. And sometimes the repairs can go awry, but that's a whole other thing. But in general, I mean, I think that the brand, every little minute touch point of that brand harkens back to this central theme for them of this cleanliness, this sharpness, this just user-friendly nature of all of their products. And so to me, that just stands apart as why so many people love them so much, and why people have such an immensely strong affinity with that brand that they're willing to wait in line for a $1,500 phone for days on end instead of ordering it online because they want to get it 20 minutes before somebody else.
Yeah, great example.
That's the difference that stuff can make.
Yeah, great example there, Charlie. And we've got Irene popping into the comments agreeing that unboxing is part of that experience. It's part of how people interact with that brand, and it has a lasting impact. It has that wow factor that evokes some kind of emotion from the user of those products. And then, as you said before, it's what other people say your brand is what it really is. Well, I think no one would deny that Apple have got this following where if you're an Apple user, you're not a user, you're a fan, you're almost a disciple of the Apple way of thinking, the think different mentality. So then what they've created then is people then talk about them in the way that they want to be seen. What's your reflection on that?
I mean, I think that the word you said that's really key here, and this is something that's often overlooked. It's referred to in that Netflix special about social media platforms. I forget what it was called, but like the word user is a very interesting word. It's only used in certain contexts when you think about someone that would do drugs as a user, but then someone that uses websites is also a user, users of products, right? And it's really interesting when you think about it, because if I think about an Apple product user, I don't think about that as a user. I think about them as a customer of Apple. Whereas if I think about an Android user, they're an Android user. Like they use that platform. But to me, Apple treats its people that use Apple devices as customers. And there's a white glove kind of treatment and vibe that you get from Apple. Whereas with an Android phone, with an Android platform, you may not get that as much. It's a little bit more, I guess, traditional in the way in which they do that business in terms of phones, and it's a little bit more you are a user. And so I think that has a huge impact on the way, and that as a framing device, it has a big impact on the way people would feel about a brand, right? Because that permeates through all of these other touch points. I think that it's very clear the way that Apple looks at their customers, or at least the way they curate the way they look at their customers, so people feel a certain way and the signals that they get. I'm not going to try to say that they don't want your money, because they obviously do, but there's a way in which they go about it that is so unique in that space and has always set them apart to me. That is really it's pretty, as far as brands go, it's about as high quality as you can get.
Now, I mentioned to you that my wife often asks the most insightful questions. She's done it again this week. So her question has popped up. When you start to buy the iPhone, you then feel the urge to buy the AirPod, the iPad, the MacBook. So you're not just buying a product, you're buying into a brand, and you're buying into a family of products. Any reflections on Say's comment there, Charlie?
It's a smart comment too. I mean, it's what Apple does. I mean, they are very smart about trying to find a way in which, okay, if we can get you in the door with our brand and you are in line with our brand and you like this one product, why wouldn't you then have all these other products that are interconnected? If you have an iPhone, why wouldn't you want an Apple Watch? Why wouldn't you want a MacBook that you could connect that to? Why wouldn't you want earpods that you could connect that to? Why wouldn't you want all these devices to speak seamlessly to one another so that you can go about your life? And when you think about what the future holds 10 years from now and where people are going, you can immediately see why Apple has put so much money over the last 5 years into cars, surprisingly enough. They want to, what's the next logical thing? They've done all this other stuff. What is the next thing they can do to really embed you further in this brand? They want to build that brand kind of connecting piece across your entire life, and the car is the place that they can do that next, and that's where they're evolving to. It's very interesting to see that, because it makes a lot of sense for them, but it's also something that is, as a brand, to do that, to be like, okay, we make phones, now we're going to make cars. That's a big leap for a brand to take, even a brand like Apple that's so well established. So to me, it's interesting, because they obviously want you to get all these products, but they know, like, if they can make a really great car, they have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are going to buy that and be on the waiting list for that instantly, because they want that car, because it is an Apple car and they know every single thing is going to connect to it. And as a brand, that's affinity you don't get normally.
That's super interesting, Charlie, and it was going to be interesting to see what the future holds for that, for sure. Got a few other people joining in. I'll just make some call-outs there. We've got Glow Calabo also joining from the Philippines, and Girly Calabo also joining from Sharp in the Philippines. Sharp's an interesting brand as well. I think that's an organization that's done a lot of work on their brand to see where they position themselves and what they want people to feel about their brand. So we've used that word now multiple times. We've used the word feeling. We've used the word emotion. Tell us, Charlie, in your view, what role does emotion play in brand?
It's probably, if not the central role, it is on the very inner periphery of the key cogs that make a brand work. You can't have a brand that does not that resonates with people without some sort of emotional tie-in. When you think about a sales process or a business development process, even, and this is something that you are very familiar with because I have shared this with clients, especially when we talk about clients that work in a B to G space, so they're doing business to government, right? People often think about a certain way that government, procurement people are going to think about something. Oh, we need to target these people in these government offices who are going to do this, they're going to do that, and they have these feelings about this, and they are looking for these technical specifications, and we need to do X, Y, and Z, and the brand needs to mirror that. The thing that people forget about the people that work in these agencies, the people that work in all of these different government offices, the people that work in any decision place that you are trying to get someone to make a decision or to choose your product or to do something. The thing about those people is fundamentally that they're all actually people, unless they're robots, but I don't think they are. So the fact that those people are all people means that studies have shown that people make decisions emotionally. It is time and time again shown that those decisions are made emotionally. Purchasing decisions, bigger decisions like houses and things like that are made emotionally. And so if you want people to make a decision around your brand, which is entirely the entire purpose of a brand is to have people make a decision, you want those people to feel an emotion towards your brand. You want them to feel something about it. You want them to understand that if I engage with you, whatever the brand is, I'm going to then get that return of this emotion and this feeling. A great example of this, and honestly, I would encourage everyone to go and try to find the most recent series of Fitbit ads. I've been getting served these on YouTube and LinkedIn. Personally, I'm a Whoop fitness band user, so like I'm on the other team, but I am obsessed with this ad campaign from a brand standpoint. I'm not going to try to describe it because I'm going to be describing music and it's going to be terrible, but in a general sense, like there's this upbeat music, there's this entire theme, and the entire video, this ad evokes this feeling of motion and movement and excitement and your heart beating, and it all jives together in this listen to your body, like, oh wow, I really need to do this right now. I want to get up, I want to go get active, I want to go get a Fitbit, I want to go do this. And it just evokes this feeling, and it's such a flawless advertisement. It really is. And I've seen it multiple times. And so the advertisements that are best like that, and even there was a Jaguar ad for a car that I saw about a year ago that had this, they drove around the car and they had it looked like a projected cat like chasing the car around. And I remember that, and the way they had the bass in that commercial, it gave you this sense of speed and of almost danger. And it was just like, but like this almost danger, almost, not quite all the way danger. And it signals these emotions that make you want to take an action, make you want to go make a purchase or even just have that brand being part of your life in some way. And so it is so important to have that connection to signal those things to people. You can't even underscore it.
There's a few things I want to summarize there, Charlie. I think they're all really important for everyone to realize. So first of all, people do make decisions emotionally and they justify them rationally. And for decades, we always thought that we were rational people and all this kind of stuff. But it's now proven beyond doubt that people make decisions emotionally and they justify them rationally. The second one is just about being memorable, right? So people remember how you made them feel. The famous Maya Angelou quote, people may forget what you said, they may forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And this all leads us to the buying behavior that people are going to buy from people or brands that they know, like, and trust. And they are all feelings. They're all feelings associated with how does that brand make you feel? And importantly, how does it make you feel about yourself? Because when you're making that decision, that purchasing decision, you're looking for an emotion about how you feel about that purchase. Like, do you feel better about yourself? Do you see yourself in that Fitbit commercial where you're imagining that you're one of the characters in that commercial? Yeah, really good, Charlie. We've got a couple more people joining us. We've got Gabriel Leonor also joining us from the Philippines. We've got a very big Filipino audience today, which is absolutely wonderful and great to see you all. If I can all remind you, if you put questions into the chat, Charlie and I will also be going to user questions shortly. You can either share a comment on what you agree or disagree with what we're talking about, or you can also type in your questions there. Charlie, a challenging one for you. Be careful with this one. We don't want to end up in any kind of, you and I in any kind of legal trouble. But can you think of examples where a brand is trying to portray something about their brand, but what we said before, it's not what you say it is, it's what others say it is, where they're trying to position themselves in a certain way, but it just falls flat and people talk about your brand in a completely different way to what you wanted them to talk about?
There are two perfect examples of that, and they are honestly two of the biggest brands in the world. And this has happened over the last, one of them is in the last 4 or 5 years, and the other one is much more recent. It was about a year and a half ago on International Women's Day. So the first of which is probably that there was that Pepsi commercial that aired during the Super Bowl 3 to 4 years ago. It had Kendall Jenner. It was right around the time of a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests and all of these other things, and they aired this Super Bowl commercial of Kendall Jenner walking up to the picket lines and like handing someone a Pepsi, and just completely, again, missing the entire point of what the protests were about what was happening, like, and just completely tone deaf about what was going on in the world. And people are often, some people in advertising will tell you that any PR is good PR. And, any press is good press. Any attention you can get is great. Not the case here. This is just like, it sent the wrong signals to millions and millions of people to say, hey, Pepsi doesn't care about this entire group of people. and they took a lot of heat from that. They had to do a lot to overcome the damage that did to their brand. The other example is on International Women's Day last year. Burger King had a whole campaign planned out that they just did not plan, that could have been good if they did it the right way, but they just didn't. They didn't think it all the way through. And I remember telling one of my colleagues at the time, who I think you may have met as well, Jackie. We were talking about this because she was very incensed by this. Burger King tweeted out, women belong in the kitchen. That was what they tweeted out at one point in time. That is not my personal view, just to caveat that. But they tweeted out that women belong in the kitchen, and then they followed that up with like a thread of like these other tweets about how good women are and why they belong in all these other places, right? And all this other stuff. But it was the first tweet that got retweeted a million times and got spread around the news. And it's like, oh, Burger King thinks people should be in the kitchen, or thinks women should be in the kitchen. And it was terrible because it was clear they were trying to do one thing, and it was just executed so poorly. Whereas, like, if for me, and they tweeted it out, it was just a regular tweet. There was no video on the main tweet. Whereas, if that were me, as a concept, from Burger King's standpoint, is a good concept. But it's where a brand, this is the importance, I think, of having the right people and having diverse voices in the room. Like, to me, that's a commercial that's a strategy that probably was come up with by a lot of guys, right? And this is the importance of having diverse perspectives on your marketing teams, as a leader, having those different perspectives so that you hear, yeah, maybe this isn't the best idea like this, or you might think something's a great idea, but it could offend an entire group of people that you just may not even be aware of it. And so, if it were me, Burger King, they would have wanted to kind of come into this and say, at least from my perspective, if I were going to redo that ad, I would have had them have it be a video that they produced where there was a woman in the Burger King kitchen, and it was like, and she herself, the woman, says, women belong in the kitchen, and then like the walls just like fall down around her, and then it's like she's in a courthouse and she's sitting there, and she has a gavel all of a sudden, and she's like, and in the courthouse, and in the Senate, and here and here, and you show all these different places, and you show that like sure they can work in a Burger King kitchen, but they can also be president of the United States if they want to be, and something like that would have shown that message effectively. They did not do a good job of it in just tweeting it out as a sentence, because then it just became this viral thing and no one paid attention to any of the other sub aspects of what they were trying to do. And so those are two big examples from two huge brands globally in which they sent the wrong signals, and the brands took a big hit as a result.
I'm hearing some really interesting things there, Charlie. If I can unpack it just a little bit for a second. So the Kendall Jenner one and Pepsi, if I can talk about that for a moment. And what my reflection is there is to be really careful with what we call trend surfing and making sure it doesn't become trend jacking, right? So when there's a movement going on where there's attention towards a serious topic, I have to say I get offended when brands get on board with that and they try to capitalize for their own benefit that movement, that social movement. And in this case, Black Lives Matter had nothing to do with any commercial interest. They had no business being there. I'm going to say that very openly. And if I get in trouble, I get in trouble. They had no business being there. And then they did themselves brand damage along the way anyway. So there's trend surfing, which I kind of get. There's trend jacking, where you're taking over something and you're trying to get commercial benefit from it. And it's just not on, and people see right through it anyway and alienate people along the way. So, yeah, sorry to get a bit emotive there, but that kind of stuff does really upset me. And then the second
But also,
part,
you think about it. I mean, oh, sorry. I was going to say what's coming up next month is Pride as well. And you're going to see all the brands coming back out with those rainbow logos. Yeah. Just let me put a token rainbow logo on my site. Maybe we'll do a post or two about how we care about this community, and we're going to move on with our lives.
Yeah.
And that's really upsetting to me, because it's so I don't think a brand should just do that and then move forward and do all that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So there's a super fine line between being a supporter, being an ally, and helping people in the way they want to be helped, and taking commercial advantage of a situation. That's what that's what I'm getting at there. And the best way to be an ally, by the way, in all of these situations is ask the group that you're trying to support, how can I support you best? Not hijack their agenda. Ask them how you can support them. And apologies again for getting emotive about it. It is something I'm quite passionate about. The second one that you brought up around the Burger King one, the lesson there is just take a second look, take a second and third loop thinking approach, going, how could this be interpreted in a way that we don't intend? So yeah, some really good lessons there, Charlie. I'm going to accelerate a little bit here. I'm going to say we've got a great comment here from Abdullah. Abdullah works at Cubic, by the way. I don't know if you came across him when the work that you did with us, but Abdullah's amazing project manager and leader. And it's absolutely great to see him on the show. He said, not a question, just thanks for organising this and very informative. Now we do have a question from Faris in Singapore, and this is the leadership project, Charlie. So I love this question. Why do leaders need to worry about personal brand? So I'm not talking about company brand or organizational brand. Let's start with what is personal brand, and then why do leaders need to worry about it?
Well, personal brand it's similar to what we just talked about with brand, is what they say it is. A personal brand is the way that you are perceived by other people fundamentally, and that is, it's the way that you dress, it's the way that you present yourself, it's the way that you think about yourself internally. If you love yourself and you take care of yourself, and all of these things come out in different ways to people. Leaders, it is so important to worry about personal brand and to think about it and to consider it, because your personal brand as a leader, to me, it dictates the trajectory of the company in a lot of ways, and it dictates the way that your team members are going to feel about the trajectory of your company. If you have to report to someone who's demonstrative and has negative views and all these other things, like how can you, as an employee then, and as a member of this team, you're going to struggle a little bit more to align with this person's vision. If this person tries to come into a room with you and your team and they're like, we've got this huge project coming up, and they're trying to galvanize you and get your support on this project and get everyone rallied together so that you can accomplish something great, you might do that for someone that you respect and someone that you align with from a personal brand standpoint. But if you to kind of go back to this topic, if you're working on a campaign to support the LGBTQ community, right? And your leader's personal brand is, not exactly aligned with that type of support in one way or another, you're going to question everything about the motives of why you're doing that and why you're being galvanized to do this. And so for me, as a leader, that personal brand is so important, because nothing is going to build trust with a team, trust with clients, trust with people that you work with in any capacity, like that personal brand, because it is, if you're true to that and you're being true to yourself, and that's the way that you're coming off, everyone will understand that. And Mick, I would ask you the question is in your essentially as a client of mine, right? Did my personal brand come off in a positive way to you when we worked together?
Oh yeah, without any doubt, Charlie. I can answer that without any hesitation whatsoever. That your creativeness and your belief in what we believed, and your ability to bring that to the table, I can say very openly to you, Charlie, that the things that we would say about you when you're not in the room are even more glowing than the things that we say when you are in the room. So in your case, your personal brand is higher than what you think it is. How's that sound? But there's
that's
yeah.
I would say the same thing to you, right? Like it's the same thing, and it's the same thing. Allison and Josh and I will talk about. Oh my gosh, we love Lauren, we love Mick, we love all these folks that we're working with, and it's because of how genuine and true to your own personal brand you are, and how and Lauren is, and all the other people, and Christian is, and all these people that we work with,
Cool.
and it's just so important. I can't emphasize it enough, because it is something that you see, especially now with the Great Resignation and all these other things. That you need to be moving in all these directions, and people aren't going to follow you if they don't believe in you as a person, and your personal brand is important for that.
Yeah. Can I unpack that a little bit, or summarize it? It'd be the better word this time.
Please.
So come back to, brand is not what you say it is, it's what others say it is. So as a leader, your personal brand is what they say about you when you're not in the room. It's not what you say it is, it's what they say about you when you're not in the room. And I hark back to our live stream last week with Marcel Dane, where he spoke about how not to be a horrible boss. And he left us with a powerful message that horrible bosses never think that they're horrible bosses. They all think they're great bosses. But as soon as they leave the room, people start murmuring and whispering and going all kinds of sometimes expletives about the way that they are. And then the second message is about alignment and congruence, is about knowing what your personal values are, knowing what your personal values and beliefs are, expressing those values and beliefs with clarity, and then living by those values and beliefs. By expressing your values and beliefs with clarity, you surround people, you attract people that believe in the same things that you believe. And then by living with them, living by those values and beliefs with complete consistency and alignment, that builds and retains trust. And if you're not doing those things, you go back to square one, where Marcel Dane says you're a horrible boss because people don't know where you stand, or you're inconsistent. One day you say this and another day you say another thing. So my summary on the why they need to worry about personal brand is because it's what people are talking about when you're not in the room, and whether they'll be willing to follow you anywhere. And if you're able to express those values and beliefs with clarity and then live by them with consistency and alignment and congruence, then that's why personal brand is so strong. And you'll get people to do amazing things as a leader when you achieve those things. How's my summary, Charlie?
Oh, that's great. I mean, I think that's the thing is that last piece that you just said, getting people to do amazing things. People are, especially in our field, right, in brand and marketing, everyone wants to do something amazing. They want to do something creative. They want to do something that's so exciting that they can remember it, and people are only going to really realize that full potential a lot of the time when they're empowered to do so. And they're not going to feel empowered to come up with these creative ideas, to push the envelope forward, if they don't have a leader in place that is going to foster that, to kindle that creativity, and as their personal brand, be more than just their boss, but be someone who can listen, can understand, and actively listen to not just what's going on with the work stuff, but if the person's having a hard day, and understanding them as people. That is so important, because then when they do have that creative idea, they're gonna run into it full steam instead of just kind of crawling into it, and it makes a huge difference for your brand. Yeah. So, great summary.
All right, brilliant. Okay, thank you, Charlie. I'm going to move on to Irene's question now, because I think this is one that many of us come across from time to time as well. What are the simplest ways a leader can repair or renew their personal brand? So let's say they have had some kind of misstep or whatever the case may be, and they now regret it and they want to repair that. Any thoughts?
It's difficult. I'll tell you, it is one thing with a brand is built on trust, right? And just like anything, when you break someone's trust, when you do that, it's hard to earn that back at times. And I think that, one of the ways in which you can work on renewing that is transparency. To me, is so important as a leader, and especially when you think about your personal brand. If you've got a lot going on, right, and let's say hypothetically you have a 3-week stretch where you're always on the ball, you're doing all this stuff, and then all of a sudden for a couple weeks you've got something going on outside of work, and you're late, and your work isn't as high quality, and you're not doing as well as a leader as you might typically be doing. And your personal brand might take a hit, and maybe you say something during that time, and you're frustrated, and you just argue with a coworker, and that comes off in a meeting, and your brand takes a hit, right? To then be able to be open, to be transparent about either what you're going through or why those decisions were made, and even just transparency, even if it's not a situation where you just did something accidentally, and if you did something wrong, transparency in terms of openly apologizing and explaining yourself and talking about how you're going to improve. Just being transparent with your journey as a leader is a great way to help to restore that brand, because people, as we talked about earlier, people are people, and they're human. They respond to human stories. People love redemption stories. Everyone can relate to a redemption story, because we're all human. We have all failed so many times in our lives that we all are always seeking redemption for one thing or another at different points in time. And so we can all relate to that. And, we all mess up, and some of us mess up more than others, and some things can be irredeemable. But like in most settings, from a personal brand standpoint, it can be redeemed, but you have to be willing to bear it, to be transparent, and to let people in. And if you're going to close people off, and you're going to say, like, I made this mistake, but like, whatever, like, I'm going to move on, and I'm just going to put my head down and keep churning forward, and we're not going to talk about this ever. That's when everyone's going to talk about it behind your back. That's when your personal brand is going to take a hit. That's when people are going to question your motives, because they don't understand what you were really thinking. And so that's really how you have to move forward in that sense. And to me, it's the only way you can repair a brand, is to be transparent, to do that stuff. From a personal standpoint. And it's hard to do, though. It does take a lot of work. And so I wouldn't advise not to get into that spot, but if you get into that spot, like you just have to be transparent.
I'm going to say it's the same thing for company brands as well, Charlie. When things happen, get on the front foot, be open and transparent about it. Absolutely. To build on the leadership thing, I'm going to say open and transparent, and I'm going to add humility. People appreciate humility. They know it anyway. So I'm gonna build on that a little bit, right? So if you've made some mistakes and you've made some missteps, there are some people that say that a leader showing some kind of weakness or admitting that they made a mistake is a sign of weakness, but it's not. It's actually a sign of strength. The ability to stand up and say, yep, you know what? I stuffed up. I'm sorry. I'm not going to justify my actions. They were wrong. But this is what I'm going to do to improve, and this is what I'm going to do to fix it. So taking those forward steps, and coming back to what I said a moment ago, John C. Maxwell, I borrowed this one from him. It's amazing. these people that think that admitting mistakes is a sign of weakness, his one response to that is, that's because you think they don't know anyway. And what you said, Charlie, is that, well, if you don't admit this mistake, you don't be open and transparent, they're going to talk about it anyway. So aren't you better off talking about it and talking about it in the open and kind of standing up and taking some kind of moment associated with that and just saying, yeah, you know what? I'm human. I made a mistake. I deeply regret it. This is what I'm going to do to fix it, and then move on. That would be my summary of that, Charlie. Any thoughts?
No, that's pretty much right. I mean, you have to be able to take responsibility for your actions, good, bad, or otherwise. You have to take responsibility for those things and to share. And if you're a leader, it's even more important to share how you came to make the decision that you made, or that choice that you made. Yeah, and that transparency becomes paramount. Yeah.
Excellent, Charlie. As we get towards a close, I've got a couple more questions I want to bring up onto the screen. Got a comment here from Diane, which is a key one, which is a big aha moment for her. This concept that you said on the podcast as well as today is that your brand is not what you say it is; it's what others people say it is. So, thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's a huge takeaway for everyone out of the podcast and also out of the live stream today. And now we've got a question from Glow and Glow Calabo. And we know that you're a brand storyteller, Charlie. This is one of your true strengths, but not everyone is so comfortable. I think there's a general acceptance now that storytelling is powerful. People are getting that, but not everyone's comfortable with it. Any tips that you have on how to get started if you're not a comfortable storyteller?
Absolutely. And one of the easiest things that you can do to tell a good story, and the most fundamental part of any story that makes it relevant, is that it has to be relatable, ultimately. And I think that's to use a weird example to illustrate that point. When people think about Kanye West right now as a musician, not talking about anything else, as a musician, when you think about Kanye West as a musician right now, you think about his music, and it's interesting, it's different. It's not really relatable, and he doesn't have as much of a following in a music sense as I think he used to have, right? But when he was first coming up in College Dropout and Graduation and these albums about the things he was going through, it was so relatable. And the stories he was telling as a musician were so relatable to the people that were listening to them that you engaged with them in such a strong way. And that's something that I think all leaders can take into account when you think about storytelling, is especially if you're not good at it in your own mind. I think everyone can be a great storyteller. It's just a matter of how relatable can you make your story. If you're gonna tell a story about something that happened to you personally, one of the things that I would advise is, before you tell that story, to think about a little bit what kind of points in that story intersect with a lot of other people. For instance, you could start a story about, you could have seen a meteor coming from the sky, right, at some point in time. You might lead with that, obviously, if that's that big of a thing. You might say, oh, I saw this meteor coming from the sky. But even then, so I was driving. What is one thing that everyone sometimes has in common before the pandemic? Oh, I was driving into work. I was grabbing my coffee, and you'll never guess what I saw coming out of the store. And I use this example on the podcast, is working with NASA scientists, is, why do you do what you do? That as a framing device for a story. Everyone has a reason that they do the things that they do. It could be because you were so passionate about the work. It could be because it's for your family. You could tell, but telling the why behind what you do, or the why behind what motivates you. Everyone is intrinsically motivated by one thing or another. Everyone has different passions. Some people love to run marathons. Some people love to do bodybuilding. Some people love to play video games and it's just, people have these different things that they like. If you tell a story about yourself that intersects with people in different ways, it's a great path in there. And that why you are doing something, that why is always so important. And for me, when we talked on the podcast about that NASA story, we talked about the reasoning behind why it was so important to do that no one was listening, and how that changed, right? And that's part of it too. So you kind of want to tie people in with that relatability, that connectivity in the beginning of the story, just to make sure you want to grab their attention and engage them immediately. And then at the end, you want to, or in the middle slash the end, the kind of climax of your story, you want to pay off that introduction with, you may have started, this is what I'm passionate about, and boom, this is what I'm doing to help further this passion. And as you get through it, you can build from this standpoint of, here's something relatable, and here's how I'm making that thing that's relatable into something that's like extraordinary for me and myself, or something that I'm working on. And that is always the key, as we talked about emotion earlier, right? Like, you have to make people feel something, and they're not going to feel something if they can't relate to it. And so any story, you have to make it relatable. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to land in a certain way.
Yeah, wonderful, Charlie. So be relatable, absolutely. Be human, and include that element of why you do what you do, and that will build an interesting story. That relatable and be human, the people that you're talking to are human, right? So, and they want to see themselves in the story that you're telling. And I love the example you said, I was driving down the road. Well, yeah, most people know how that feels, right? And then building towards that. I'd like to add one more thing, because you mentioned this on the podcast as well, which was, think about the emotion that you're trying to evoke in that story. And if you're about to go into storytelling as a leader, or whatever the case may be, think about a time that you've felt that emotion and regale that story, but do it in relatable terms, something where people will see themselves in that story. Yeah. All right, Charlie. That's probably all the time we got for questions today. It's been an absolute great honor to have you on the show today. It was wonderful to have you on the podcast. And anyone that hasn't caught Charlie's podcast yet, please do listen to it. He goes into much more detail than what we've covered today on the live stream. Thank you for all those people that joined and said hello, and also popped in your questions there. Charlie, it's very late at night for you. It's almost midnight, so we really appreciate that you're an early riser like me, so you're probably not going to get a lot of sleep tonight, but we really appreciate you joining us at this time, answering those questions and taking some of those comments from the audience. And we wish you the best of luck with your future endeavors as you continue to help other brands to get out there with amazing strategies and amazing brand storytelling. Thank you so much, Charlie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. As always, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to join and talk to you, and hopefully this won't be the last time we do one of these chats. And in general, thank you again for the shout out and all that stuff. It's been a pleasure. And seriously, if anyone ever has any questions, I'm always around. I love this stuff. Brand and messaging, as I said, I live and breathe this stuff, so I love it. So Brilliant. Feel free to reach out.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Charlie. We're going to finish off with a few messages from the Leadership Project. Thank you again, Charlie, and we'll see you soon. So thanks everyone for joining again today. A couple of messages that we would like to leave you with. So first of all, this week we had the first cohort of our flagship program, the Gateway to High Performance Leadership, graduate. And it was an amazing event where all of our students achieved a wonderful transformation in their leadership during the 8-week program. And we are now taking applications for the next entry into that same program. So the program starts again on the 9th of May. And if you would like to take your leadership to the next level, please do go ahead and get in contact with us. We'll have the team put a copy of the link in the chat where you can take a discovery call with us, and we can discuss what that program is all about and see if you would be a good fit and whether you would like to join our next intake of that transformative program that takes your leadership to the next level. The next thing I'm really excited to tell you is my book comes out next week. My new book, You're a Leader Now What, comes out on the 4th of May. So may the 4th be with you. It's Intergalactic Star Wars Day. Kind of picked that date for a reason, but I'm really excited. I've been working on this book for 8 months now. I'm super excited to bring it to you. And we are going to have our launch on the 4th of May, including we're going to have a launch webinar where you can join us and you can ask me questions. So I'll be under the spotlight this time. You'll be able to ask me questions about what inspired me to write the book and to talk about some of the contents within the book. And that launch webinar is going to be on the same day as the launch. If you would like to join our launch team for this, there's a link that the team are putting in the chat. You can get earlier access to the book than anyone else by joining our launch team. You get access to the book then for 99 US cents. And in return, all that we ask is that you give us an honest review on Amazon within the first kind of, let's say, week or so of the launch. The earlier, the better, because we want the Amazon algorithm to fall in love with the book so it promotes it to other people. But we'd love to have you on the launch team. We'd love to have you join our launch webinar coming up next week, and super excited for that. We also have a live stream on next week as well, and we're excited to have Lee Prosenjack join us. And I'm going to rack my brain now for which episode he was from. He was from episode 39 of the Leadership Project podcast, and he was just amazing. It's hard to describe just how engaging Lee is. He's an amazing storyteller too, just like Charlie is. And what he specializes in is in facilitation. He comes from a facilitation background of facilitating live events, in-person events, but he's been able to translate that now into something that's just amazing when it comes to engaging people in a virtual environment. Let's face it, a lot of us are either working now in a work from home environment or a hybrid environment where some days you're in the office and other days you're looking down the barrel of a lens and you're on Zoom calls and all this kind of stuff. And Lee is amazing at being able to see the authentic you. And there's great leadership lessons here about being able to engage and connect with someone at a human level, even down the barrel of the lens of a camera. So please don't miss that live stream next week. We're really excited to bring that for you as well. So that's it now. Thank you for joining us today. Got a couple of reminders as we go and close out here. Please do remember to follow the Leadership Project podcast. It's available on anywhere where you can listen to podcasts. We're there: Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, you name it. We're on all of them. So please do catch the Leadership Project podcast. If you would like to join our Facebook community, it's called Learn Together, Lead Together, and it's your community. It's not ours. It's for you to connect with other like-minded people, have a wonderful conversation about leadership. If you're interested in our services, including our flagship course, please do get in contact with us with that next entry of the flagship course starting on the 9th of May. And please do follow us on YouTube. Faris Sadek puts together the most amazing curated videos that takes a lot of our content and crams it down into kind of more consumable kind of bite-sized elements that are anything between 3 to 12 minutes long. Takes the amazing lessons from each of our podcast episodes, from each of our live streams, and he puts them into what I call an edutainment type concept where you can get it in a bite size. So don't forget to follow us there, and of course follow us on all of our socials, from our LinkedIn newsletter all the way through to Facebook and TikTok and the like. So once again, thank you for joining today. It's been a great privilege bringing you this live stream show today. We look forward to bringing you another live stream next week, and also the book launch and the book launch webinar. In the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and always remember to challenge the status quo.